Hello, everybody. It's Jason here again with my friend and colleague Jen, and we are going to talk about the empowered humanity theory attitude of establishing a value centered identity and strengthening that by engaging in practices that build awareness and equanimity. So let's get right into it. Um, I started thinking about identity around 2018, 2019, and then definitely by 2020, because I noticed the trainings that I was attending at work, the trainings I was having to facilitate at work, and just the overall culture and climate of where we were as a nation really was stressing that our identity was determined by our innate biologies.
Mm-hmm.
And by that, I mean, the world began to see as a blank kind of person, these are your traits and these are your qualities. And it just it felt really dehumanizing to all people. It felt like reducing people to the most basic reductions that we could be reduced to.
Mm-hmm.
And it just felt, I guess, psychologically, spiritually, and just overall stale. And I knew that there had to be something more. There's more to us than the stereotyped traits of our biology. So I started thinking about, well, what can we lead from that makes us that unique person? And also, what can we lead from where we are not doing harm or damage to ourselves, and we are not doing harm and damage to other people, be it strangers, and especially people that we are in relationship with. So how can we establish an identity that can do all of those things in a very meaningful and authentic way?
I want to just add quickly I'm feeling this vibe because I too was part around about the same time, I'd say 2017, 2018. And this is when I was getting into the diversity, which is so important to me. And I took a training. You mentioned you took some training, and it was all like I was flattened to a white woman. Like nothing else in my life mattered. And I was given these traits, and that's a story we can talk about another time. But I was given these traits that I was like, no one asked for my permission to label me in these ways. And so it like froze my identity in time, in place, and it flattened me out as an individual. And that's what I'm hearing you saying. Like this idea of identity really has done damage to who we are, like who we are as people.
As human beings.
Yeah.
So what you just told me, I have had friends that are of multiple skin colors and various genders and various sexuality, like every single different type of group. I've had individuals from that group tell me the exact same thing that you experienced. So then again, it really got me thinking like, okay, there's got to be another way to do this. And what I landed on was establishing a value-centered identity. And that is identifying what are your core values and the definitions of those values and what those values mean to you, and living your life the way that you think, the way that you behave, the way that you interact with other people is in strict accordance to those values. And I'll tell you what I landed on. I landed on integrity, dignity, and humor, because I felt those were the three things that I needed to get me through the really kind of difficult situation that I was in.
Okay. So those were your three values that you identified for you, that were your core values that dictated kind of how you operate in the world.
Yes. So I selected integrity, mainly because I saw a lot of things in the world that I knew were not right for me, and I knew were not right for other people, and that I needed to be able to stand up and stand firm. So integrity, it helped me because I had that circuit, through my mind. Jason, you're a person of integrity. This is when you need to speak up and say something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that really helped me in those moments, where you feel your amygdala kind of getting hijacked and thinking, you're like, okay, so I'm going to be firm in integrity. I'm going to be a person of integrity. And then I selected dignity is A, so I could always maintain my own dignity. But then as I engaged with conversations with people that may have thought differently than I did, um, I knew that if I was honoring their dignity as a whole
Mm.
person and human being, then I wouldn't do relational damage, and that I
Right.
wouldn't, essentially reminding myself of being a person of dignity and honoring the dignity whenever things did, sometimes get a little bit heated and we start to do that. Just remember, honor the dignity to keep that lid from flipping. So that
And
was, go ahead.
And I was just gonna say, and just to go back to what we were talking about with the brain, the lid flipping being like allowing our amygdala, or what I call like our beastie, that primitive part of our brain, allowing that to control our
Yes.
mindset. So that's what, like, by you centering these values and remembering them in all of your interactions, that was like something that you use in a way to tame that primitive part of the brain, right? Did I
Yes.
hear you right? Okay.
Yes. Because I knew I was I was just engaged in a conversation with a person or with people in a room that there was no physical safety threat. So I
Mm-hmm.
knew that there's no reason to respond or react that way. And when you do, when you feel it coming on, these are some things that you can do. And then
Yeah.
obviously humor, because man, these past few years,
I hear that.
sometimes all you can do is laugh,
Yeah.
and then to also not lose that sense of humor. And also, humor is quite a wonderful social diffuser.
Mm.
When things in the atmosphere or the environment feel a little tense, a joke, pointing out something hilarious or maybe some kind of hypocrisy that's going on, is a good way to defuse and to get us thinking about, maybe that maybe we can do something different there. So
Mm-hmm.
those three values, and really I haven't done another value setting exercise in a few years, because as I engage with the world today, those are the three things that are still important to me. But the thing about a value centered identity is our values change over time. So doing those exercises periodically can be very helpful. And later on, we will actually walk through that same exercise together. But let's get into, okay, so how do we strengthen that value
Yeah.
centered identity? Remember, so how do we keep practicing that so eventually our values are the first and foremost things that come out of us
Mm-hmm.
automatically without having to think?
Mm-hmm.
And that's by engaging in practices that build awareness and equanimity. And let's just kind of break down awareness real quick.
Okay.
Awareness can be defined as an insight into ourself and an insight into others.
Mm-hmm.
So the more that we can gain insight into ourself, what are our strengths? What are my strengths? What are areas where I could grow in? What are some things that trip me up a lot? And are there habits that are interfering with my potential? Are there new habits that I can pick up? So just thinking about our awareness, and also with the values, we ask ourselves, in this moment, is my thinking in line with my values? Because sometimes, I'll have a thought and it is an indignified thought. Uh, in this moment, are my behaviors aligned with my values?
Mm-hmm.
Whenever, because it's inevitable, as much as I have trained myself and think about these things, and as many times as my amygdala has not been hijacked, sometimes it still does. Like
Right.
there's times when the normal reaction is and then I can calm down like afterwards or immediately afterwards. So I was thinking, so how can we even prevent that?
Mm-hmm.
And that's also by when we think about equanimity,
Yeah. Explain
that
that a little bit more. What do you mean by that?
sure. So equanimity, let's just describe it as the ability to see things unfolding in real time without uh, judgment or reactivity. And then not just in any moment. Think about that moment. There's chaos going on. So to be able to be in a stressful, an intense, a chaotic moment. And once again, if your physical safety is guaranteed, we don't want to be in a situation where our life is in danger and we're just trying to watch it unfold as it takes us down. So equanimity is just that ability to see things as they are. And here's an example. One time I was in a very very heated discussion with somebody that was extremely angry, disrespectful, indignified, and being hurtful with their words. And in my head, I said, I'm going to practice equanimity right now. And what I did, I just wiggled my toes in my shoes to feel that sensation. And I said, in my head, wiggling my toes in my shoes. I feel my feet on the ground. There's a person in front of me. They're yelling really loudly. And the wall behind them is brown. I feel the ceiling fan air hitting me on the head. So again, in that environment, I was focusing on the real things that I was seeing versus other reactions that we can have when somebody is yelling, because that's a situation to where we kind of are in a threatening situation. I mean, it's kind of, but I my safety was guaranteed. So one of the brain tricks behind that is, so once again we're integrating our
Mm-hmm.
brain more. And once
Yeah.
that happens, then we're able to kind of calm down. There's a saying,
Mm-hmm.
if
Mm-hmm.
you name it to tame it, whatever that
Okay.
emotional response is.
Yes. Yes. I mean, I don't mean to interrupt, but yes. So I didn't know that like it was coming from one side of the brain or the other. That's really helpful. But like there is scientific like research that shows if you can label your emotions, in some ways you are slow jamming that amygdala, that beastie that's trying to have you just react
Yes.
emotionally. But if you can stop and say, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling whatever I'm feeling, right? But
Yes.
then there's even more research that says the more granular you can get,
Mm,
the even better. So like not just angry, I'm feeling angry or frustrated or I'm feeling unvalued. If you can name your anger.
right.
And what I hear you saying and what I know the science says as well is that you taking that time to label it, to name what you just said, to name it, is actually bringing that more prefrontal cortex, that more rational part of our brain, into the equation, slow jamming that amygdala that just wants you to react and
Yes.
allowing you to respond instead
Yes.
of reacting.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
It's,
it works. Like it really,
yes,
really
it
works. So
works.
for a period in my life, I had to turn off sadness. I just said
Mm.
I had to turn it off.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I started understanding, once I came into that concept of, the name it to tame it and little mind hacks that we can do, then I would say, and still, like, I'm sad right now,
Mm.
or right now I'm angry,
Right.
right now I'm happy. So to vocalize those things, and you can actually feel the kind of, that kind of sense of
Yeah.
calm. So now, one thing that we can do with, let's think about practices that build awareness and equanimity in a
Mm.
different way, because we went through, what we can think about and what we can do in those moments, but we can actually cultivate awareness and equanimity whenever things aren't crazy and chaotic. We can
Yeah.
do those. We can take time to do that whenever we are calm. And just a simple way to do that is breath work.
Mm-hmm.
When I say breath work, I mean taking that 12 seconds to
Mm.
inhale to the count of 4 and
Mm-hmm.
briefly hold it, and exhale to the count of 8,
Mm-hmm.
and that whole what, 20 something, 20 seconds
Mm-hmm.
ish, uh you're following your breath,
Yeah.
or your mind's wanting to think about, okay, what are you going to cook for dinner? What did that person say to you? Don't forget about the laundry. Oh, did you pay this bill? Oh, look, there's the dog. Your mind is going to want to do that because our
Right.
mind is a time traveler. It's always thinking about something that happened in the past or planning for the future. Remember, we talked about 47% of the time we're not aware of what we're doing.
Right. Yes. Yes.
If when we take that 20 seconds to follow our breath, we are focusing our attention.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing. So the more that we do that, here's something else about that. The more we engage in those practices,
Mm-hmm.
be it a guided meditation, be it repeating a mantra, anytime that we are doing something in the moment and looking at something, observing it for what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'll be outside looking at trees, and I'll try to, how many different shades of green can you find?
Mm-hmm.
And then be outside, focusing on sound. How many different sounds can I identify? And
Mm-hmm.
then whenever our brain starts thinking and doing something else, we can just say, "Oh, my brain did that thing again. Let's bring the attention back to what we're doing." Because every time, it's actually good for when the brain wanders, when
Yes.
we're
Yes.
breathing or practicing,
Right.
because each time it wanders and we notice that it wandered, we say, "Oh,
Yes.
bring it back." We're actually it. You can kind of
Changing the
think of
neural
it.
pathways.
Yeah, and
Right.
you can think of it. It's like kind of lifting weights for your
Mm-hmm.
brain, if you
Yes.
will.
Yes. I've
And
heard that said too, where it's like, in a way, it's almost good for you to recognize this, like when your brain wanders, because it is every single time you're like, ups, and did what you just said, you are creating a new neural pathway.
and strengthening those that are beneficial, and you're
Right.
strengthening the interconnectivity of all of your different brain networks.
Right.
So remember, an integrated brain is the number
Mm.
one predictor of our overall well-being. So these practices that build awareness and equanimity play a huge factor
Mm-hmm.
in our personal well-being and how we are in relationship with others. So here's one thing that it does. Let's go back to our two hemispheres. So in the middle is our corpus callosum, which I like to use the scientific word goopy connector tissue, gooey or goopy, but
Very scientific.
it's that membrane, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
in charge of connecting our brains.
Mm-hmm.
And people that have experienced a lot of abuse, a lot of trauma, violence, and sub sort, their corpus callosum is thinner.
Mm.
It's thin. So what happens there? The thinner that corpus callosum is, the less integrated that our brain is. So sometimes that's why a lot of people are just like very, very reactive, and that's just their natural way of being is reactive. It's because their brains aren't quite as integrated as they could be.
Uh-huh.
And the practices that build awareness and equanimity, engaging in those mindfulness practices, it actually increases the thickness of our corpus callosum. So that's a way
Wow.
that it, with thinking about neuroplasticity,
Yeah.
we're actually increasing that connecting fiber of our brain whenever we take those times to breathe, to see how many colors we can find, and to
Right.
just observe our thoughts in a moment.
Yeah.
Another mindfulness is just what what thoughts am I having, and treat those thoughts like
Mm.
balloons. Like, oh, there's a thought there. Whenever we do that,
Mm-hmm.
we're strengthening that corpus callosum. We're better integrating our brain. And remember that resilience
Mm-hmm.
constituent of well-being.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it takes a lot of time and a lot of these mindfulness practices, but Davidson's work shows that over time, with extensive practice, those practices that build awareness and equanimity actually strengthen the resilience constituent of well-being. So, think about this. Think about how many times in a day can I engage in practices that build awareness and equanimity, and do those things as many times as we can, so we're building our resilience and we're increasing our well-being.